You have to try this if you want to stand out as a photographer. Because, let's be honest, as photographers, we rely way too often on the gear that's available to buy without ever thinking of customizing that gear or completely building our own. So in this video, I'll show you the top 3 photography gadgets you can build yourself. Let's get right into it with technique number 1, creating in-camera writing. Yes, in-camera writing. To achieve this effect, I'm going to place a piece of cardboard with a cutout in the middle and front of the lens. Later, the shape of the cutout will determine the shape of the bokeh. But before I can do any of that, I first had to figure out 3 things. First, what kind of lens to use. Second, how big our designs can be. And third, how to mount the flimsy piece of cardboard in a reliable way onto the lens. So let's start with the lens selection. You want to make sure to use the lens with the biggest aperture you own. For me, that's a 50mm 1.8. If you don't have a lens like that, don't worry. You can still use this technique. Your design's just gonna be a bit smaller. Speaking about the size of my design, let's figure out how big we can make it. To do that, I start by cutting out a small square from a piece of cardboard. As you can see here, I begin by drawing a rough outline of my lens. This makes it a lot easier finding the center where I later need to place my cutout. By holding it in front of the lens, we can see the effect we are going for the first time. Some other things you might notice is not only that we lose a lot of the blurriness in the background, but I also gain a lot of vignetting. The easiest way to fix this is to increase the size of the cutout. Now, if the cutout is too big, the bokeh is just gonna be a circle again. But if it's too small, we'll have lots of vignetting and lose a lot of the blurriness in the background. To find perfect dimensions for the design, I'm going to increase the size of the square step by step, holding it in front of the lens every time. Now, when the edges start to round over, I know that the design can be slightly smaller than that. In my case, I have a circle of about 18mm in diameter to work with. Always remember that the size is lens specific, so you need to make different size designs for different lenses. After having figured out what lens to use and how big my design can be, it's finally time to get the in-camera writing effect. I started by trying out a singular letter, in my case, the letter X. To do that, I simply used an X-Acto knife to cut out the shape of the letter from a piece of black cardboard. I later used a step-up ring to mount that piece of cardboard to my camera, and lo and behold, it worked. Now, after trying a singular letter, the next step was obviously trying a whole word. And here I came to face quite the challenge, as the letters became way too small for me to cut out by hand. That's why I decided to use my 3D printer to make these, and I have to say, they turned out beautifully. So, yes, you can make in-camera writing. But let's continue with technique number 2, making your own photography filters. I started by buying a lot of cheap UV filters. Each of these was just $3. And although when buying filters it is often recommended to choose the biggest filter size you might use, in this case it is best to just go for the cheapest size. In my case, these are all filters with a diameter of 52mm. Now, although these are a bit too small for some of my lenses, I can just use a step-down ring to adapt them. As long as your filter covers the glass area of your lens, you should be fine. But let's turn these boring UV filters into something way more interesting. An easy way to do that is to cover them with a layer of hairspray. I like to spray it onto the inside of the filter. That way it is a bit more resilient against water. After letting it dry, you've made a filter that's not only comparable to some of the filters you buy online, but even has two big advantages over them. First, you can easily change the amount of diffusion. If you want more diffusion, just add more hairspray, and if you want less, just remove it using a wet cloth. The second advantage is that you have complete freedom in the coverage of your diffusion. What I mean by that is that you can easily mask off certain areas before applying the hairspray. This will give you some quite unique effects. Now, if you like this video so far, maybe consider liking or subscribing. But let's continue with the next technique. Another very easy way to make yourself something like an anamorphic lens filter, for example, is by adding scratches to the glass. Before we can do that though, we first need to prepare a few pieces of thick cardboard. Or, more specifically, circles the same diameter as the glass of your filter. As they don't have to be too exact, I just quickly cut them out using some scissors. After that, we can place the cardboard circles underneath the filter. Make sure that the filter is completely resting on the cardboard and that the outside of the filter is facing downwards. As you can see, I added a pencil line to the top piece of cardboard going straight through the middle of the circle. This line will work as a guide during the next step. Speaking of the next step, you're going to need a sharp metal object. If you have an engraving chisel, that would be ideal, but if not, don't worry, an X-Acto knife works just fine. Just take the knife and run it along the cardboard line multiple times. The pieces of cardboard will enable you to exert quite some force, allowing you to make a long and even scratch into the filter. If you now mount the filter to your camera, you'll see that lens flares will appear perpendicular to that exact scratch. Again, using this technique gives you quite a bit more freedom than just buying one of these filters online. If, for example, you want to create a star filter, you can just add more scratch lines onto your filter, giving you a wonderful customizable effect. If you really want to make these filters your own, you can even go ahead and break them apart or use sandpaper. In combination with the hairspray and some purposefully added scratches, this will give you a marvelous, unique effect. But let's continue with technique number 3, turning your SLR into a pinhole camera. The easiest way to do that is to cut out some cardboard with a hole in the middle. Just tape the cardboard onto the camera and you'll be able to see the effect for the first time. Another thing you might notice though is that this is a really inconvenient way of mounting the pinhole to your camera. A better way is to use one of these camera body caps. Just mark out the middle using a center finder or a ruler. After that, drill a small hole in the place you've marked before. In my case, I'm using a drill bit with a diameter of 1 mm. If you want a bit more flexibility in the size of your pinhole, just drill a bigger hole and cover it with a piece of cardboard. That way, you can easily change the diameter of the pinhole by replacing the cardboard. And there you have it, a pinhole that's as easy to mount to your camera as any other lens. And that's it. These are my top 3 photography gadgets to make yourself. If you have ideas or questions, let me know in the comments. If you're looking for a more detailed description of each of these techniques, you can watch the videos on screen now. Until then, see you next video.